Welcome back to the Podtask, brought to you by the Texas Association of Specialty Courts, which is also known as TASC, T-A-S-C. TASC is a statewide nonprofit that builds and strengthens Texas specialty courts through collaboration, advocacy, and education. For many years, TASC has been hosting an annual training conference that brings many professionals together to network and learn from one another. Now, TASC is bringing you a podcast solely dedicated to the things that matter to criminal justice professionals from all over the state, and where we will discuss all things related to Texas Specialty Court programs. I am your host, Liz Wiggins. I am the current communications director on the TASC board. I am also an attorney. In the past, I worked closely with specialty court programs as a former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney, and as a program manager providing technical assistance to court teams across the state. During this podcast, you will join us on the journey of exploring Texas specialty court programs in action. You'll have the opportunity to listen to conversations with professionals about the challenges and the motivations of being a part of a specialty court team. We will focus on real people doing real work and making a real impact. Join our conversations by sending me questions to ask future guests or to provide feedback about past episodes to thepodtask@gmail.com. Be sure to stay tuned until the end of each episode, as I usually wrap up with news about what to expect next and some food for thought until we meet again. As always, please help us by liking and subscribing to the show and sharing our show with people you know. Before we start today's episode, I need to give you a heads up that there were some technical difficulties that came up during the first half. Before the interview, I had a storm in my area that impacted my internet connection. I thought the issue was resolved, but I was wrong. Even with these technical issues, this is a great episode that I do not want you to miss a moment of. Today, we will talk about the importance of including the right nonprofit on the team, where we have a conversation with Devon Anderson. She is the CEO and president of Justice Forward, which is a nonprofit in Houston, Texas that supports local specialty court programs in unique ways. Her journey in life and her passion for helping others is nothing short of inspirational. In fact, I enjoyed speaking with her so much that this episode went longer than I planned. So without further delay, let's get on to the show. Today, I'm joined by Devon Anderson with Justice Forward. Devon, it's so nice to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Can you tell the audience briefly, real quick, about who you are, what you do, and what website they can go to get more information?
I am the president and CEO of Justice Forward, which is a nonprofit in Houston that helps people who are either in or have graduated from specialty courts in Harris, Galveston, and Fort Bend County. And our website is justiceforwardtx.org.
So I have to say, I am very excited you're here with us today. I have actually had the pleasure to see you present multiple places, and I learned about Justice Forward just a couple years ago, actually, and I thought it was an amazing organization. And I cannot wait till everybody gets to hear more about the work that you do and why you do it. But first, before we get too far into that, I'd like to hear a little bit more about your past experience and what led you into this role. So can you share a little bit about your career experiences and your personal life and like what's helped you prepare for the role that you have now?
Sure. Let's see. I'm trying to think of how far back to go. I came to Houston, I think like everybody, most people do, for work. I wanted to be a prosecutor, and I got hired by the DA's office here to do that. I did that for 13 years and loved it, tried a lot of cases and helped a lot of people, I felt like, but I started burning out really badly. And so my husband, who I met at the office, was a judge, and there was a judge who was retiring. And so I decided to run for a criminal district court, a felony court. And I won and started presiding over that. And it was right about that time when drug courts started in Harris County. And it was Judge Caprice Cosper who got them really underway there with the help of Mary Covington, who was her coordinator. And I was in Judge Cosper's court for like 2 years as a prosecutor. So she came to me to be the fourth drug court judge. And I didn't really know much about it at all, and really didn't know much about substance use disorder, but I respected her so much. I went ahead and started doing it, and it ended up being the thing I loved most, because I saw the transformation. I mean, I just saw these things that just really changed my whole outlook on criminal justice, on the approach that we should take with people who are, hopelessly addicted, that they're not, you don't give up on them. They are humans, and they deserve a second chance. And it just literally changed my life. But then I lost the election. So all the people in my party were swept out, and I became a defense attorney, and that was really a good experience because my partner and my law partner, who's Judge Brock Thomas, he was also a drug court judge, and so our practice was really devoted to helping people with substance use disorder, alcoholics. We really got to specialize in that area and get people help and get them the right results in court. And then I became, well, and I guess I'm just going to keep talking about myself. I'm trying to make it quick.
That's
but
perfect. No,
it's
please.
all,
Don't rush at all. This is
yeah.
great information.
Okay, I'm like 58 years old, so I have kind of a long history. I mean, I have a long career, and it's been weird because I always thought I'd be a prosecutor my whole life, and then I've like had all these different jobs like a millennial, and I never thought I'd be like that. So, um, anyway, my husband at the time was running for DA. He decided to run for DA, and so he got elected, and I had to quit the practice of law because every case would have been conflicted out. I went home to be with my two kids, Bren and Sam, which was cool. I've never had gotten to do that and enjoyed it. But pretty quickly after that, my husband was diagnosed, and it became a situation of just trying to help him. My husband passed away 8 months into his term, and so I was kind of there without a job and my two kids, and they were 10 and 12 at the time. And I had a lot of people approach me about trying to get the appointment from the governor to be attorney. And kind of out of desperation, without much thought at all, I did it and got appointed to that massive job, which I did for 3.5 years. And I had a lot of goals there, but my primary goal was to change the approach that the prosecutors took to dealing with people with substance use disorder and mental health disorder in the criminal justice system. And I think I largely succeeded by requiring education around the topic and making them understand that incarceration doesn't solve anything, and that people need treatment to break the cycle. And we need to use the specialty courts, and we need more specialty courts. So I'm really proud of the work I did in that area. And then I wanted to go into nonprofits. I didn't want to go back to the courthouse. I didn't want to be a defense lawyer. And I really wanted to keep working in the area because I kind of skipped over the fact that I'm in recovery, even though I was an active alcoholic while I was on the drug court bench, ironically, and knew I was, and thinking, wow, this is really inappropriate. I didn't really quit drinking until I was a defense attorney, because my partner Brock was sober, and it just became a problem in my family life. That's a whole different story, but I'm sober now for 14 years, and this is a really important subject and area for me. And so the fact that I landed with this organization is a godsend, because I work with people in recovery every day, and I help people to get into recovery. Just really affirming to my own sobriety also. So I can talk about how I got into Justice Forward next, I guess. So it's a funny.
Devin, before you do that, I have to say, first of all, congratulations on 14 years. That is amazing. And
Thank you.
That's a huge accomplishment. That it's impressive. And I knew a little bit about some of those struggles, but I didn't know all of that. And I just, first of all, thank you for sharing that. But I almost want to be like, you should have told me all that, because I was already really in awe of you, but now I'm more, it's even worse. So, all right. So I might just be bothering you after this call just to keep learning more about you, but
thank you.
This is amazing information, and I hope people, when they hear this, hopefully that it really hits home for them, because I think a lot of attorneys that we've seen struggle with substance abuse, but they don't recognize it, and they don't want to talk about it, and yet they are in a lot of ways supposed to be leading the people that they either represent, that they're prosecuting, or that they're sitting on the bench and overseeing their cases, right? Um,
Right.
and yet they're struggling with a lot of the same things that the people in the criminal justice system are struggling with as well. And I saw that when I was a prosecutor as well from the very beginning. But what I also saw is how few of those attorneys recognize it and acknowledge it. And we've seen a lot of attorneys committing suicide, um,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of depression, right? And I hope that if anybody's listening and is struggling with any of that, I really hope that this story resonates because it's really inspirational that you've been able to get to this side of your journey. And I know that other people can get there too. And so anyway, I'm sorry. I off tangent there
No,
for a second. Just thank you for
no,
sharing
I think
that.
I didn't really, so I didn't become sober through AA. So I didn't really start talking about my sobriety until after I was DA. I did a couple of times when I was DA, but when you're in politics,
Yep.
it just didn't work. And would have been a huge distraction, sort of, but then I also kind of have regrets around it. But anyway, I think anybody can get help, but it is something I did not want to do. I love drinking. I mean, I did not want, I cried the day that I finally decided to quit. And the only way I was able to do it without AA was because my husband quit with me too. And it was like us two trying to find a new life, which is what you have to do as a sober person, especially in the world of law, because everyone drinks.
They do.
Everyone. And it is that's your whole social world, your whole social life. Everything revolves around it. I mean, we would go drink to celebrate a verdict. We'd go drink to drown our sorrows on a verdict. I mean, I'll tell you, my life is so much better now. It is, I can't say that enough. Even though I feel everything so much more, I can't numb out. I have to face it, but it is just such a beautiful, honest way to live. And I'm so much more present for my kids and for the people in my life. And I'm involved with a man who's also sober, which has just been fantastic. And he does work AA, so I get a lot of AA in my life, So that's good. I really like to go to meetings with him and stuff. But yeah, it's a very important part of me. And the fact that I get to work in it is even better. And things just came to a perfect point in my life where I was contacted by Deborah Kaiser. I mean, this organization's been around, the one that I'm running now, Justice Forward's been around since 2003. It's really since the drug court started. These guys from Emerson Unitarian Universalist Church started it to do white papers. Like, I don't even barely know what they are, but like advocacy pieces on behalf of specialty courts or on behalf of drug courts, because it was such a outlandish idea to give criminals treatment, instead of locking them up. And so it was an advocacy organization, but then they realized that there really were a lot of needs that people had going through the courts that the county couldn't pay for, like transitional housing and transportation and stuff like that. So they became a nonprofit. It was the Harris County Drug Court Foundation. And I was actually on the board when I was a defense attorney and became chairman. It was an all volunteer organization until 2019. They got a grant from the Fondren Foundation to hire an executive director. And it just so happened I just left the board, said, okay, we can't pay you a lot, and this is just a part-time job, but we want to expand. I'm like, yeah. So it is, I gotta say, besides being a prosecutor trying cases, this is my favorite job I've ever had.
Tell me more about that.
I started as part-time, and the way it was working is that this board would raise money and give it to like the Harris County Probation Department to spend on certain things like transitional housing. Well, we didn't have a budget. We didn't have any structure around it at all. So I rewrote the bylaws and started trying to figure out how to take requests from all these different courts in an orderly way and we figured out how to do, like, I had an assistant by then. We did electronic forms. They just emailed to me. I designated a representative of each section of courts, like Keith Lyles from the drug courts, Drew Gaines from the mental health courts, Michelle Barnett from Veterans Court. And now I have to name everybody, don't I? I'm sorry.
That's how that works, actually, yes.
Yeah, I know. And I'm Kelly Varon from juvenile courts, and now I can't think of this. Well, our sober court person has changed like 3 times. So anyway, they are our Court Alliance Council, and they meet with us quarterly. They provide updates on their courts for each board meeting that we have, and they're the ones who submit the requests on behalf of the clients. And it's really worked out well. It's a very simple system, but it works. And so they know they can ask for transitional housing, grief and trauma counseling, transportation in the forms of bus passes, sometimes Uber. We have Harris County rides here, which is really amazing. And we'll pay for that. Or is that the only thing? Those are the things, that we do mainly with the probation department. Oh, and incentive gift cards.
First of all, thank you for sharing. That's a lot of information about Justice Board, even more than I realized. One of the things I thought was really interesting was this idea about these wraparound services and assisting people while they're in the treatment courts. You brought up the incentive gift cards, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about that, because one of the things I've heard from a lot of judges is that they don't always have the funds for that, and a lot of the staff have to pay for that out of their own pocket, that
Right.
they voluntarily give that money. Can you share a little bit more about why your program, why your organization actually gets those, and how important that is and how they're used?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really critical component of evidence-based treatment, and it's one of the best practices is the incentives and the sanctions approach to dealing with how the clients are reacting to the treatment. And incentive gift cards are like little $10, $5, $15 gift cards. Walmart's a really popular one, but we'll do Starbucks or Sonic or I'm just trying to think. It's a lot. I think Walmart's the best because you can get just about anything there, but we do HEB sometimes, and they are given as rewards in court for doing something really, really well. Like, oh, you finished your community service, or, oh, you hit 90 days in your sobriety. But there's also Mary Covington, and that's the other full circle thing here, is that Mary retired from the county, and now she's our program director, which has been like getting Jeff Bagwell for your Little League team. I mean, it's like having a total freaking rock star on our staff, and she's doing so much more than I ever thought anybody could do in this job. But she, after going to the national conference, we decided to do treasure boxes kind of for the courts, especially in Fort Bend County. We have a human trafficking court that we're supporting with girls, and that's a very, very difficult population to work with. And they're little incentives, not just the gift cards, but also like if they do something good, they can come up and draw from the treasure chest, and it could say, you get a standing ovation today, or you get a hug from the judge. The judge is a super huggy person. Or, and I mean, Mary said that the judge, the staff, and the girls are just delighted every time somebody gets to go to this thing. I mean, it's so exciting. And you've got to think about the people that we are working with, so many of whom, left school way too early, had everything against them in life and never heard any words of encouragement, especially from an authority figure like a judge, and for what that means. I mean, it's priceless, and it really, really makes a difference. And so you don't really have to spend money. I mean, if you've ever seen Judge Diane Spute's Judge Bull Spute, I don't know which way it goes, her thing on incentives, she's so remarkable about all the ideas that don't cost money to do, just to reward, it just makes a big difference.
No, I love that you're talking about that. Before I ask you more questions about the work you do, I do want to dive into Mary Covington, because you mentioned her earlier. when she, in your history that she was coordinator, I believe, for one of the
Hmm.
courts. And
Yes.
now she's one of your superstar people on your team, which sounds amazing. But tell me a little bit more about that history and what she kind of does for your organization with you.
Yeah. So Mary, I mean, I met her when I was a young prosecutor in Judge Cosper's court, and we kept in touch through the years. But she was, running Judge Cosper's court. But when the judge wanted to start the drug courts, Mary is really she was the backbone of that court. She kind of switched to being the coordinator of those four courts when they started, and she was the one who was finding transitional housing, who was finding the community partners. I mean, just digging people up to try to get help for the clients who were coming through who had no safe place to live, who needed gas cards or whatever. I mean, Mary made all that happen. And she's a big, I know, with Task, she's on the board and has been for years and been an officer and all that. So she's very well versed in best practices and how courts ought to be run. And then she's approached and helps Judge Mark Carter start the first Veterans Court in Harris County, and Judge Mike Fields, the misdemeanor Veterans Court, and then helps with the felony mental health courts. And so she was up in administration in Harris County before she left, kind of overseeing the court side of the specialty court programs, and making sure they were running smoothly, because I guess everybody who's listening to this podcast knows that the judges are volunteering in most counties. They don't have just designated judges, which I wish we did, because we lose them every time there's an election, but have to start over, which is devastating for clients, by the way. But Mary, once she retired, I mean, she was on our board. I should say that too. She was always involved in the Harris County Drug Court Foundation and was actually on the board when they hired me. And she continued to work at Harris County. And then when she was retiring, I'm like, Mary, you need to just come work here. This is what we can pay you. I need somebody to liaison with all these courts, because we were expanding by that point to other counties. And let me tell you what she does. She has it on her calendar where she goes to Galveston and Fort Bend County courts, because because of their distance, it's a little more difficult to stay in touch with them. But she goes every month. She is making sure, and this is so critical, that they're following best practices. I think a lot of people listening to this podcast would agree that judges with the best hearts want to start these courts, but are not following best practices. Now we put it into our MOU this year that you have to follow best practices. So Mary's been making sure that they are, and she's like a huge source for them of ideas and connections throughout the state and resources. I mean, nobody was having graduations in Fort Bend County, and Mary got Judge Becerra in the felony mental health court to start graduations. And it is just the coolest thing. They love them. I mean, that's a great county. They're all very passionate about what they're doing, but they didn't really think about making graduation a ceremony, like we do in Harris County. So that was cool. That was one huge thing she did. I can go on and on about her.
No, I think it's great. The reason I asked, obviously I've gotten a chance to get to know Mary a little bit because she's on the board of the Texas Association of Specialty Courts. And I know that when she left her role and then joined your organization, I was so excited because at that point I knew a little bit about Justice Forward, and I just was like, oh my goodness, you're going to join this amazing organization. I hope that means I get to hear more and more about it. So I was always curious, like, first, because I knew that you were such a big role in the organization, I was always curious, like, how she would come in and fit into the organization. And that's what I really wanted to ask real quick, was just your organization, it sounds like it's a pretty small one, right? Like, you don't have a whole bunch of staff. Can you share a little bit about, like, who's there to help run everything that you're doing, all these amazing things that you guys are doing?
Well, I mean, we only have 2.5 employees full time.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's me and Mary, and we have this amazing assistant who really should be like our, I guess, office manager. I mean, she can do anything, Leah Dozier, and she works 30 hours a week. She's actually up to 30. But it's our board. I mean, they help so much with fundraising and volunteer. We don't have volunteer opportunities per se. So it's really just the fundraisers that we need help with. But we manage these. We now have a portal on our website, so we manage these requests a lot better. And now that Mary is handling the requests and Leah helps with all the payments of the vendors that we use, then I'm free to fundraise and network and try to get as many speaking opportunities as I can so people learn about specialty courts and they learn about Justice Forward.
I love that. So let's go back to you joining the organization. Did you have any specific vision or goals that you were like, you know what, I'm going to change something. I'm going to do something different. You know, what we've done so far has been great, but just we need to do something a little bit different. Do you remember that? Because I know it's been a little bit since you've joined, but do you remember those days?
I do. I mean, I was really swamped with trying to build the structure around the organization and get the request protocol in place, but I knew that we didn't want to pay the probation office anymore, that we needed to pay vendors directly on behalf of clients because that kept us from being a pass-through organization, which we did not want to be. We needed funding from private foundations, and they will not fund pass-through organizations where you're just taking their money and passing it on to another nonprofit. I mean, that makes no sense. We are paying, I mean, on to the clients is what I meant, or they weren't going to give us money to give to the Harris County Probation Department, right? So I started going out into the community because I knew we needed to find resources, especially sober housing, which is so hard to find, safe, sober housing that the probation department will work with, because they have the liability for the clients. So it was really becoming more of a member of the community, which is, I believe we have now achieved that. And then helping more people, different people, but with the same issues. So juveniles are a lot different than adults. People with mental health issues are a lot different than people with just substance use issues. I mean, we had to take all that into consideration when finding these resources. And so now we have housing partners that are really great that can accommodate different ages and different issues. We have transportation that, like I mentioned, that Harris County Rides, where you can schedule a ride for someone, and they have like live tracking where you can see if they've actually gone where they're supposed to go, and you can request the same driver, which is really important for kids who've been trafficked going to trauma counseling, or people with mental illness trying to get to their counseling appointments, So just things like that. But it's also just trying to get well known in the community, and I have not achieved that goal yet. And getting the word out about specialty courts, which I'm trying to do. Nobody knows what they are, including lawyers. Yeah. Nobody has heard of them. It's so frustrating.
It really is, and it's always surprising when I do come across attorneys who are in the criminal justice system who are not familiar with specialty courts, and I'm not always sure I understand how that happens. I have an idea of why it happens, but it is kind of interesting, and that's one of the things that I really liked about Justice Forward is because you do a lot of community education, and not just, general community, but just the legal community education because it's so needed. And that's one of the things I notice in a lot of different counties that I've been to and worked with, especially courts, is that a lot of people that community education falls on the judge, right? And the judges are already working their full-time docket. They have to deal with that election, right? Every few years, right. They're usually volunteering their time for a specialty court in addition to what they're doing. And then there's a lot going on with the whole team, right? And the team sometimes, the treatment team can often change because staff changes depending on who is the makeup of their treatment team, right? Right. And so there's just a lot of variables, a lot of moving parts, and a lot of things that they're trying to accomplish. And first and foremost is making sure that their program works for the clients that are coming into the program, right? And so it's not always as important. The importance of educating the community is just even the legal community is just not always as high a priority as so many other things. And so I love that that was a role that Justice Ford takes on.
Yeah.
And you do. I love that your website has information about it, that even when you're fundraising, you're doing that as well. And one of the things I really liked about your answer earlier is that you said that you were swamped with figuring out the structure. I think that's so important, right? Because so many people come into a new role and they're so focused on their vision and getting there. So,
Yeah.
you can say, hey, look at what we've accomplished. But a lot of times, what's missing and what's a huge issue is getting that structure organized, right? Implementing new procedures and creating and developing new procedures that actually work and are more efficient. So I love that you talked about that, because that, I know you touched just very briefly, but that was like the first thing you said. And I
Yes.
appreciated that.
Because it was just me. I mean, it's
Yeah.
only me and 18 courts. It's like, I got to figure out how to make this where I can handle it myself, because it was just me. Yeah. And it worked. It did work. So, and it
So,
still does. That's why we could go to other counties. It's just pretty simple structure.
so I'm glad you just mentioned the 18 courts or the 18 programs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I was going to ask you first, is it still 18 programs or is it more now?
No, we took 2 on in Galveston and then 4 on in Fort Bend County. But
Okay.
Harris County's gone down.
How many programs do you have total now? Is it now I'm trying to do math.
Yeah, it's
20,
23. 23.
23,
Yeah.
23
Yeah.
programs. Okay.
Mhm.
23 programs that your
Mhm.
organization is supporting,
Mhm.
and there's 2.5 staff members,
Yes.
and apparently a very amazing board
Mhm.
um, that assists with helping. Um, and you guys you just keep growing, right? And
We do.
and I'm going to ask you more questions about that in the future. But I do want to talk a little bit more about your relationship with the courts, because you and Mary both came from that environment and you were able to see it from several different roles, as a prosecutor, as a defense
Mhm.
attorney, um, as a judge, and you're able to now come into this role. Did you learn anything different while you were in this role that was there like a light bulb or anything that different? Because you'd already told me about your journey and it seemed like you learned a lot about the people who go through the criminal justice system that are in need of treatment. But did anything new come to you when you got in this role that you wish that you had known um, back when you had the roles before that you had?
That's a good question. I got to think
I
about that for a
put
second.
you on the spot.
I guess the biggest realization that I never thought about especially when I was a drug court judge, was what happens to them when their probation's over.
Love that answer so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
I I love that answer so much. And I was going to wait till later to ask you about that. But I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait to
Okay.
dive into that, only because I'm gonna wrap this part of my questioning up then, which is, can you just briefly share a little bit about just what your role is like with the courts, specifically with Justice Forward? Like, do you guys have a relationship with the courts at all? Do you have to build relationships for your
Yeah.
organization to continue to grow? What's that look like?
We do. And because I had been gone from the courthouse, the first thing I did with our board chair was go visit all the dockets and kind of talk to the judges and tell them, we're going to expand. We want to help you. This is how we help. Can we sit in on your dockets? It was a little touchy with juvenile, but they let us in. And man, you learn so much listening to dockets, listening to what people need when you just listen to the clients talking to the judges. And so we visited all of those courts, and we decided, and this was one thing that I started, was that we needed to have a voice at graduations, because we have no real direct contact with the clients except after they've graduated. And we can talk about that later, what we do for people after they leave. But while they're in the program, really the probation officer is the representative for the client, right? And the Court Alliance Council member is who we have contact with, and sometimes directly with the probation officer, but not the clients. So what I wanted to be able to talk to the clients directly, and graduation seemed to be the best time to say, hey, great job. You're this far. You still have a ways to go, and we're not going to stop helping you. And so here's our name. We have refrigerator magnets. It's so stupid that we give out, but it's got our website and our phone number on it so they can keep it and know that they can come to us anytime for help. So the judges have been really gracious in letting me have 5 minutes at every graduation. So Mary and I attend every single graduation in every county. If one of us is out of town, the other one covers, but I go to all of them, and Mary covers me when I can't. We've even had Leah speak at one when we were all out of town. So everybody covers it, make sure that the graduates are spoken to. And then again, Mary has a really close relationship with boots on the ground people in the courts. I mean, because she attends staffings and dockets every week in different counties. So she is there, and they know she is there to help them. So we have a good relationship with the courts.
I want to jump into the organization's relationship with the community generally, before we head into the people, right? Which is I'm dying to get to. So, what's the relationship like between the organization and, I was going to say, the Harris County community, but now you're also in Galveston and Fort Bend. So what is that like? Like, do you have to do a lot of, I know you do some community education, but what do you do with that relationship? Like, what's that look like?
Well, it's different in each county. In Harris County, we have really raised our profile in the recovery community by helping start the Party Sober Partnership, which is a nonprofit that puts on sober events for people in recovery. That's one of the things that I wanted to do for people who are leaving probation. So they have a community they can join if they don't have one already. So we have all these nonprofits that work with the same clients that we work with, and we all get together to put on these massive events. So it looks like that, and it looks like me and Mary always looking for new resources in Harris County. In fact, she's visiting 2 sober living places this week to see if they might be suitable for our clients, because we always are looking for the best housing that we can get, that we can afford, In Galveston County, when we expanded down there, I realized that none of us are from Galveston, and it's a very closed place, BOI, born on the island and all that. So I rewrote the bylaws to add an advisory board that would be a local board made up of people who live there, who would help us spread the word about specialty courts and help us fundraise. And so we have this stout board down there with a commissioner, the judges, both judges, Judge Mallier and Judge Ellisor are on it, the drug court and mental health court guys. We have lawyers, we have bankers, we have a great board down there. And that has opened a bunch of doors to new community partners down there. But we got to Galveston, they have almost no housing on the island. So we had to go to Dickinson and places like that. So we've been amassing housing partners there, counseling partners. I mean, it takes a while to build that. Probation officers don't have time to find that,
Right.
Their clients just, I guess, before do without, or I don't know, they have a few people, but beds are full or whatever. So we help them with that. And then in Fort Bend County, we're assembling an advisory board there now, which has been a little more difficult for some reason. But I joined their George Foundation has a leadership program that I joined because it's like 50 nonprofit leaders from Fort Bend County who are in it. So that's been a huge way to network. So and we're also amassing resources down there, which they have less than Galveston, if you can believe that. I think.
I'm not too, I mean, I guess I am a little surprised that Fort Bend has less resources, but I'm also not too surprised because, you know, they kind of have this history or reputation of being very tough on crime.
Mm-hmm.
And when I've seen communities that have that reputation, and this is just from my personal experience, when I've seen communities that have that reputation, I've also noticed that the communities tend to have a lot less organizations that can help or resources available for people in need. And so what you see is usually a higher, conviction rate, higher, you're going to go to jail, you're going to go through this process, and they're going to keep coming back because those resources aren't there, right? And so it's just kind
Right.
of this cycle
Mm-hmm.
that keeps happening. So I'm really excited that Justice for It is actually in that community. I think it's probably desperately needed there, and I'm
Yeah.
sure that the work you guys are doing is really making a difference in people's lives there.
Well, it's really cool because Galveston is really on fire about recovery and about dealing with their homeless population. And I mean, it is amazing how many people are working on the problem there. But in Fort Bend County, you have Brian Middleton, the DA, who's super into this. I mean, very supportive of specialty courts, as is his first assistant. The judges are really on board there and are willing to go the extra mile to help. Justice
Amazing.
Forward and all that. Yeah, I mean, it really does. It comes from the top. And if you have a leader like Brian in power there, it makes all the difference in the world. So they even have they have prosecutors who are assigned to each court. They have a woman who oversees all of the prosecutors who are assigned to the specialty courts. I mean, they really have a big piece of it in the DA's office there. So that's awesome
Is that
to work with.
a fairly recent change?
Yeah, I mean, with him.
Yeah.
I don't know how John Healy, how supportive he was of specialty courts, but it seems like Brian's taking it to the next level.
I love hearing
For
that.
sure. Yeah.
That is really good to hear. And you brought up multiple times in the last things that we've been talking about, you brought up housing a lot, which
hmm
housing is it's such an issue, right, for so many people in our community. And it's also an issue for a lot of people across the nation. It's something that nobody's been able to resolve, this housing crisis for people in need. And yet you guys are spending a lot of time, I'm sure, finding those resources and making sure that housing is available. I'm assuming, one, that it's because you've identified that's a really big need for people. But two, I'm just curious what that looks like what those conversations are like for you, your team, and the community organizations that you're working with about the housing. Can you share a little bit
Well,
more about it?
yeah, I mean, what we provide 2 to 3 months of transitional housing, and it's usually for people coming out of treatment or coming out of jail and they have nowhere safe to go. They either are unhoused or they are living in a place where they used and they can't go back to it. So it is very important for us to find places that are rigidly sober. I mean, there's some great housing in Houston that doesn't have any restriction on alcohol or drugs, and we have to have 100% sober living, and it needs to be very structured. We have differing levels of structure type of housing that we use, but there has to be some structure and accountability, and the probation department has to be able to get information about how their client is doing immediately, especially if they walk out, because these places aren't locked down, or break the rules and get kicked out or whatever. So that's been a challenge, but we've found places, and I'll give a shout out. I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I don't care. It's, the Recenter in Midtown was our biggest find. And they have different levels of transitional housing, but they've been our biggest partner, and we have probably 10 or 12 people in there at any given time. And then the other one that is really funny is called Sharpen Recovery, and it's a young man, Nick Long, who rents houses and then changes them into sober living where, 2 twin beds in a bedroom, and they're beautifully decorated by a nonprofit that does that. They decorate homes for other nonprofits, and it's a faith-based housing, but it's optional. So probation can use it, it's not forced. But he has like 9 homes in Houston now. When we went to Galveston, I joked around with him and said, you need to open one. And he did. And then when we moved to Fort Bend County, I'm like, can you open some here? Because there's nothing here. And he's opened one there. And he's going to keep buying and keep renting because it's a rental. It's a great model. And he does a great job as far as, having everybody shares in the chores, and they have meetings there of all kinds, and you can join or not join. And it's just, those are the kind of conversations we have. So like when Mary goes and visits those 2 places this week, she's going to be looking at um, how rigid they are about sobriety and what other resources they have available, because every place that we use has meetings on site. I think that's important. Whether it's NA or AA or whatever. And she'll be looking at all of that, and especially price too, because we do get discounts because we send so many people there. So we'll be looking at price as well.
That's
because we have to raise every dollar.
Yes. So you brought up probation a lot, your relationship working with probation. I did not realize that Justice Forward worked with the probation department so much. Can you share a little bit more about what that looks like, the application of that is?
Yeah, because we can't. Yeah, no, I get you. We really can't do this without them, because they're the ones who have liability for the client, and especially with what we're providing, which is the housing, especially, but also the grief and trauma counseling. We go out and find these vendors, these providers, but they have to be vetted by the probation department and accepted, because they bear the responsibility if something happens to the client, God forbid, at a housing place or something. So we fortunately have a really good relationship with Dr. Teresa May, the Harris County probation head, and Fort Bend County, we're working with them. Galveston, they're very, this is like manna from heaven for them. You know what I mean? It's like all of a sudden they have access to resources they never had before. So they're kind of welcoming us with open arms. It hasn't been contentious at all.
That's good.
Yeah. So it's just a matter of that we can do the legwork that their probation officers can't, but we will not use anybody that's not approved by them. And especially in the area of counseling, that's very critical, because there's a lot of bad trauma counseling out there in the world. You have to be really careful. So, with our juvenile department here, juvenile courts, they pick the therapists. We don't do that.
No,
they pick them and we pay them. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that has been something that I've seen as an issue across the state, which is, unfortunately, counties have to rely on what resources are available, right? And what they know are available. And so what I've seen is, unfortunately, and we've probably all heard the stories at some point, is relying on an organization that ultimately we find out is not a good organization and could have done more harm than good for the person who was sent there to get that treatment. Right. So it is hard, and I love that you guys are actually vetting for them and helping them filter to make sure that they're finding quality organizations that offer quality programs for people.
Yeah, that's what we try to do. Yes, absolutely.
That's an amazing thing that you guys are doing to partner with the probation office to do that. So let's get to the people. I'm really excited to get to this. Okay. So, and of course now we've talked so much, and I'm like, wait, what was it that we were talking about earlier that I was so excited about? But I'm sure
what happens to him after?
Yes. Okay. So we're gonna get to that point, because I want to know what that relationship is like with participants. You've kind of touched on it already. So you guys don't actually work directly with clients generally, right? You're
Right.
like the support for the court, support for the probation. You're like almost part of the team. You're there at graduation, but all the way up until graduation, you're not necessarily talking to any participants directly then. Is that correct?
That's true. Yes. Unless they come to our Party Sober events and they introduce themselves or something.
Perfect. And are they invited to join your Party Sober events?
Oh, yes. We make sure that all the courts know about them. The biggest goal of those events for me is that they're free. I want anybody to be able to come. So we have one that we have to charge for, which is an all-day music festival, but it's still like $20, and we'll underwrite clients if they can't afford it. But everything else is free. So we make sure that all the active clients are invited. And I mention it every time I'm in graduations too, what events are coming up. So they'll attend.
I love that.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more than what happens you meet them maybe at graduation. Now
Well,
what?
I'll tell you one that just happened is we just got invited to be the lead organization for a Houston Texans game. They were going to do a day of recovery, which is incredible that they got the permission of the NFL to dedicate the Texans Titans game on New Year's Eve to recovery.
Wow.
So, yeah, we sold like 800 tickets at a reduced price, and they set sections aside from us, for us. I can't talk. So I went to and then we decided to have a sober tailgate, because who does that, right? What is that? So, I went to the sober tailgate. I showed up, and this woman came up to me and said, "Hey, y'all," I don't know how she knew I didn't have any Justice Forward thing on, but she said, "Hey, y'all are putting me through college." And it was the most awesome thing. She's a drug court client who she's studying mechanical engineering at UTSA. And she's almost finished. That's why they're able to do that. But that kind of thing happens when they realize who I am, or if we have a Justice Forward t-shirt on or something, they'll come up and say, hey, and they'll come and talk to me after graduation as well. I do get direct client contact with that, because I tell them how we help, and they'll come. I usually have 2 or 3 people come up to me after graduation and talk about, hey, I want to go back to school, or we do pay for that, by the way, or I want to be a recovery coach. So we'll pay the fees, to do that, to study, to learn how to be a peer recovery coach, the stuff like that. So, but the best thing is my drug court graduates, when I was a judge, I see all the time, because they're all working in recovery, and they're working for the organizations who are partners with us in Party Sober Partnership. So it just like that, it's amazing. I mean, I'm sitting in the Council on Recovery right now. That's where I office. And there's a graduate who works here that was on my drug court docket. I mean, it's amazing. It's so gratifying. It's just, it's this person. Yeah.
Because you're talking about people who went through your court program
a long time ago.
Yeah, years and years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so they're still in this recovery community, right, and they're still helping other people. But more importantly, they made it to that position, right? Like they got to that side, and I'm assuming that they're able to use their story and their experiences to help other people.
Absolutely, they are.
I love hearing that. And that kind of goes into these sober events. So I've seen a little bit about these sober events, but are you seeing people from those same people from like your graduations? Are they coming to your sober events as well? Are they kind of involved?
Yeah, they are. They are involved. Yeah, we're doing 4 big ones a year. We do a sober chili cook-off during the rodeo cook-off, because you can't go to the rodeo cook-off if you're sober, at all. I couldn't go when I was drinking. I'm like, these people are out of control. Like, they're out of my league. So we do that, on February 24th. And then we're doing our music festival, at White Oak Bayou. This is all in Houston, on May 18th. And then we do the big Texas Rally for Recovery, which they have all over the state. We do ours at the Houston Botanic Garden, and I think this year it's September 28th. And then we'll do a Texans game. So courts have chili cook-off teams, by the way.
Wow.
Swear to God, drug court wins every year. It's really funny. This will be our 3rd year we're doing it, and it's just so fun. And we have cash prizes and celebrity judges, and it's just, and we have a DJ. It's a lot of fun, and it's free. You can come. Anybody can come. Partysober.org. That's the website.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get the support, the financial support, to have these free programs, these free events?
This is what's kind of happened. We started with the Sober Chili Cook-Off, and we wanted sponsors for the cash prizes. And we realized the treatment people, the for-profit treatment centers, they will sponsor things. Oh. And so they have been basically underwriting our events.
Wow.
Yes. And it really, really works. They, like at the rally, they get to have a table advertising their, they pay X amount of dollars and they get to have a table to show all their recovery services. So it's really nice. And then HEB, huge supporter of ours.
Wow.
Anytime we need a gift card to buy, like chili, or not chili, but like plates and napkins and drinks and all that, we get a gift card from them. They've been amazing. So those are really, it's really the for-profit treatment centers that have become amazing. And they help us with all kinds of things like social media and marketing and that kind of thing as well.
I love hearing that because I think it's so important that the community comes together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And things like this. And I think it's great to not be exclusive is which part of the community is coming together, right? The more people from different backgrounds, different skill sets, different, different visions and missions even, are all coming together with this common purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that it's great. I love hearing that. I want to talk a little bit about fundraising. I know I've kept you for a little bit here, but um, I want to ask you a little bit about fundraising because it's not always a fun thing to do. um, can you
Mm-hmm.
share a little bit about just any unique ways you've been able to fundraise? You actually already talked a little bit about this, but anything that you could just share about your fundraising experience with Justice Forward?
Well, we're lucky in that not anybody else that I know of is doing what we do. So we get the attention of foundations because of that, and we write a lot of grants every year to foundations, and we have separate ones for Galveston and separate ones for that just fund in Fort Bend County. So that's been successful. Our events are we do this tournament, this clay shoot, like sporting clay tournament. We just started that in the spring, and then we always have a fall event. It is harder. Once people come to our events, they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Um, we're just trying to expand past the courthouse. This has always been kind of a courthouse organization made up of lawyers from the courthouse and judges. And so our board has really expanded to be from all ages, all ethnicities, all parts of Harris County. So it's made a big difference in who we get to our events, uh, to get to get more interest across the whole city. But yeah, fundraising's hard. I mean, there's 27,000 nonprofits in Houston.
I did not know that. That is
Yeah,
a lot.
it's shocking, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
shocking. And there's like, I can't remember how many in Fort Bend County. There's a ton everywhere. And so you're competing. So it's nice to be unique in that way, but it's a hard slog, I'll tell you, every year to make the budget.
I believe that. I
Mm-hmm.
think you're doing amazing work, and
Trying.
I hope people understand the value of that and understand just what it is that you're doing, the whole organization is doing to make a difference in people's lives. Because treatment programs, like they go through the court program and then they're done, right? But assuming they even make it through the program, right? A
Right,
lot of a lot of people have a hard time being successful in a program like that. And it's not because of a lack of desire to get better or to, to be sober. It's all of the challenges that they faced the day before they were arrested and put into the system are still challenges that they're going to face during
right.
that program, right?
During and after. And that's
And
why we try to help. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
And so the things that Justice Forward is doing is kind of giving them a sense of community and targeting the pretty big obstacles that even the probation department just frankly don't have the budget either to have somebody
Right,
specifically doing this, right? They're doing a lot of case management and supervising people and stuff like that, but a lot of probation departments that I know of don't have somebody who is uniquely skilled and not restricted by government restrictions to go out and do a lot of the things that you guys are doing for them to help make their job much more efficient, I think, in providing those quality programs for them.
Yeah, I wish we could go to every county. I really do. I think it's needed in every county. I mean, I know Dallas has some foundations that were founded just to support a specific court, like they have a Veterans Court Foundation. I think San Antonio has one for a specific court, but nobody that I know of besides us has taken on all the courts in a jurisdiction, and it just makes the biggest difference, I think. I mean, the things that we provide are really game changers, and that's why they're best practices, transitional housing and counseling. And we also do criminal history cleanup, which I think the only one I haven't talked about. Where we
I'm
have
glad you mentioned that actually, because when I heard that you guys were doing that, very happy. I was very happy to hear that. So,
it's huge.
It's funny that you say that you wish that you could be in all the counties, because I actually wish Justice Forward was statewide. I wish that there was a Justice Forward in every county as well. And I can see that in the future. I see a lot of potential, but I'm not the person who makes plans for Justice Forward. So that's my last question to you, which is just, what does the future look like for your organization? Do you have any future goals or anything that you can share with us?
Well, the way I'm looking at it is we're hitting pause this year to figure out what the future does look like. And there's a couple of different ways we can go. One, we can keep taking on county by county, but we have to fundraise every county we go to. So we have to pick counties that have foundations that support them. So we could keep doing that, but we'd also have to increase our employees. It's going to get to be too much at some point. And then the other option possibly is to consult, to kind of teach and sell the model. And there are organizations that do that. In Austin, they have Sands Bar, which is a sober bar, and that guy teaches his model, I know, online, and that's how he generates income for his Austin bar. There's Community First, which is that community of tiny houses in Austin. They teach that model. We love that model. We would love to get it here. So that may be the way we do it. I don't know. We want to share the love. We really do. I believe in this. I believe it's really needed. I know it's needed. I mean, we helped 356 people last year, I think. We could help a lot more. I mean, there's a lot of people who need this support and help. And it just has such great returns. I mean, when you talk about me seeing somebody from my drug court who has 15 years sober, who's working with maybe women and children at Santa Maria. I have a couple of graduates who work there. Think how many hundreds or maybe thousands of people they've affected in that 15 years.
Yep.
Not to mention their own families and their own kids and all that. I mean, it's just mind-blowing.
I want to keep you on here a lot longer. But don't hate me because I forgot to tell you in advance, which I usually tell people in advance this, and I did not do this for you, so I'm going to apologize. But I like to wrap up my episodes with something a little fun. I like to ask for 3 recommendations. It's just recommendations that are like benefits for our listeners or any other people that are, usually operating or thinking about creating a specialty court, but in this case, even thinking about maybe starting a Justice Forward of their own in their community. I'd like to ask for a useful tip, and that's usually going to be something like, what did you wish you knew beforehand, or any staffing considerations or best practices, any inspirational quote even, okay? And while you're thinking about that, somehow I want you to also listen as I tell you the other things in advance, but I'm going to ask you for a good resource, like training, assessment tools. But in this case, anything like getting a nonprofit off the ground and, the things that were really helpful for you that you think would be helpful for somebody else. Like I said, wanting to maybe start their own Justice Forward or support their specialty courts locally. And what's an important event that you would recommend? You listed some events, your sober events, which I love. Are there any other events that you can think of that would be helpful for people to attend, either for networking or for learning more about the kind of work that you do? So I'm going to go back. Okay, so that's a lot. I'm going to go back and put you on the spot now and say, what kind of useful tip could you offer our listeners?
If you're looking at starting something like this, I think the first thing to do, even though I said we're the only people who are doing this, is to make sure there's nobody who's doing something similar in your community. Because when I say we have 27,000 nonprofits here, there are a lot of people duplicating the same services. And I mean, a lot. In this arena, I guess what I would recommend is taking stock of what you have in your county, what resources you have to marshal, and how you could fundraise before you even start.
No, I love that tip. I think that's a great tip. A lot of people that are listening, if they're in the criminal justice system, may not be quite as aware of the nonprofit world. And
Right.
you're absolutely right. People duplicate their work all the time. And I wish people would stop doing that, and rather collaborate instead and,
Yes.
expand what they can do rather than reinventing a wheel that already exists. So I think that's a great, that's a really good tip. Good resource.
And what was the last one? Because I want to make sure I'm not mixing these up.
No, it's okay.
Resources.
The last one was like an event.
Oh, yeah.
So
Okay.
in a resource, even a podcast, anything that you listen to help you, like your thought process of how you build your vision, stuff like that, anything.
Well, I'll tell you what. This isn't that accessible, but they do have classes. So I didn't know jack about nonprofits. And a friend of mine recommended this leadership program at Rice University called the LINE program, Leadership in Nonprofit Executives or something like that. I never get acronyms very well. And it's a program you have to apply to, and it's like 20 people in a cohort, and they do have scholarships, but you learn like top to bottom how a nonprofit works and what's needed and that kind of thing. It's like a whole overall education. That gave me the basis for what I needed to learn all the ins and outs. But like the Fort Bend County Chamber of Commerce leadership program that's with the George Foundation I'm in right now does the same thing. There are the United Ways probably in towns have these like nonprofit introduction to running a nonprofit, or you can go online and find something, but it's a totally different world, and you've got to learn all the requirements and laws around it, bylaws and board of directors and board insurance. I mean, there's a million little things that you have to know. So I would find some kind of training program or overall something online you can watch first.
That is perfect. And
Okay.
I completely agree with you. And there are a lot of things online. I love that you were able to list specific ones. But there are definitely some available for people who are really interested in that. And I can't agree with you more. I think people sometimes are just so excited to get started sometimes that they
Yeah.
don't take the time to do that research first and understand that, again, nonprofits are very different than just starting a business in general.
Right.
So I think that that's important to do. And I'm so grateful that there is this information available for
Oh,
people
yeah.
to have. So it's like, just get out there and get the information. Don't take it for granted. So the last thing, any event that you think, that you would recommend for other people to attend, and why might you recommend that?
Well,
Anything?
for this audience, I mean, what I say to people in the community is to go to a graduation, a specialty court graduation. But for this audience, I mean, you got to go to the task conference, right? I mean, I'm not trying to give y'all a plug, but you do. I mean, I go every year, and we always take away ideas from there. Even if I'm not practicing law right now, I still take away a ton from y'all's conference. That's really what I mean, I don't know what else to recommend to people who are already working in the courts. I mean, and also, but you can come to our events, Houstonian people who are listening to this. You can come to the Party Sober events. They're so fun. And a lot of them do. We get a lot of probation. We have probation teams at the Chili Cook-Off. Okay. So
I'm going to say,
everybody.
like, even if you're not from Houston,
Oh, yeah.
if the event's on a weekend and you want a weekend trip and have a purpose for why to go to Houston, I feel like you listed 4 events that are 4 good reasons to take a
Yes,
trip to Houston, in my
that's
opinion.
true. Partysober.org. Yeah, that's it.
Perfect.
Uh-huh.
And then, believe it or not, that's actually my last question. You have been amazing, Devin.
Thank you.
I apologize for the internet issues, but
That's okay.
you've provided so much information, and this is exactly what I'm envisioning sharing with people. And I hope people are able to look at all this and listen to it and start envisioning how much better their specialty court programs can be if there were a nonprofit just like Justice Forward. They're supporting and providing help for the participants to overcome the challenges that are really preventing a lot of times people to be as successful as they could be. This is amazing information. I thank you for taking time from your very busy day to just come and talk with me and let me drill you with all these questions. Just thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm always, again, happy to talk about Justice Forward. And I would like to thank, I mean, if y'all are working in a court, you are doing God's work on this. I mean, if you're working in one of the specialty courts, you are doing such important work and you are making a difference with each person you help. So thank you very much for all the work that you do. And thank you for doing this podcast. It's great.
Thank
And having
you.
me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to our third episode of the podcast. As a reminder, see our show notes to contact us and find links to information discussed today. You can also find a link to register for our annual training conference on March 26th through 28th. Some food for thought until we meet again for another episode. Take a look around your community. Is there an existing nonprofit organization that could enhance your specialty court program and fill a role similar to Justice Forward? I'll be dropping another episode this month, so stay tuned and be sure to like and subscribe to our show so you'll be notified when new episodes are available.